staying in England for the moment. Long ball number 3, Naomi Girma, record-breaking transfer, arrived in London and was received warm applause at Stamford Bridge at Chelsea women's game over the weekend. This is the third time Chelsea have broken the transfer record for a female player on that side. Should we check out some of the official? They're rolling out the red carpet for the record-breaking American signing.
Yeah, let's see the video that Chelsea put out on socials for Naomi Girma.
Ooh,
You like the vibes? You like the
intensity?
I mean, that is very English.
Yeah, that's
Drum and bass. Yeah,
garage stuff here.
yeah. Drum and bass. I think is that people who know this kind of music will be able to tell me. I think it's drum and bass. I used to listen to Ronnie Size back in the day.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
It's a pretty nice thing to have a player celebrated at that level. Like, again, I think I want to keep this in perspective. We need to get to a place where we're not talking about 1 million. We're talking about 10 and 20 and 50 and 100. And like, that would be nice, right? That would be an indication that the women's game is getting the respect and the attention that it deserves. But before we get to all of that, we have to, before you can walk, you have to crawl. Before you can, all those things. So Naomi Girma getting a proper introduction, a la some of the biggest players on the planet at a club like Chelsea, is very cool. Very, very cool. And I know we've talked a little bit about the talent drain part of this. Like, is this a problem for NWSL that one of their top players is going to England for $1.1 million? But I still think we haven't quite worked out where that balance is going to be between the NWSL and Europe. And there are some things that are definitely going to draw particularly American players to Europe who've never played there. But I think we can just say, Rob, like that was very cool.
Yeah, that's a very cool moment. And for her, I mean, I bet she's probably pretty nervous. She doesn't probably know what to expect. Are the Chelsea fans going to know who she is? Are they that tuned into the game globally to know who this American player is? And clearly, their reception was warm. Chelsea rolls out the blue or red carpet, so to speak, for her. And for context, Chelsea women's are leading the WSL. They've got a 7-point lead after 12 games, so they are adding strength from a position of strength. And I kind of tuned in when I saw this announcement. I kind of tuned in to see what the chatter was on that side of the pond, and most of it is, this is great to see from Chelsea women's, because it seems like Chelsea men's have always had a blank check for players. And,
Sure.
There's, you're into the double figure millions of dollars. Transfer fees for men's players who just sit on the bench, who don't even see the field at all. And it also, a lot of the conversation turned into how respectful and genuinely excited, enthused the club seems, compared to how Sir Jim Radcliffe up in Manchester has, almost gone out of his way to insult the women's team and the women's game. So it's kind of this is a good story just on multiple levels here in WSL.
Yeah, I think that, it's easy to look good by comparison when Jim Ratcliffe trips over his nonsense about the women's team at Manchester United. Yeah, it's a low bar. Hopefully that's not directing the decision making at other clubs. Like, as long as we do a little bit, we can look better than Manchester United and Jim Ratcliffe. No, it should be, let's invest in this. And look, let's not be naive. Business is part of this, right? The business element is part of this. That's what led Jim Ratcliffe to say an incredibly stupid, sexist thing, and I think he's missing the forest for the trees. But let's be real, that people make decisions at the club level based on things like how much revenue are we pulling in, or how much are we spending versus how much we're making. And yes, I totally 100% believe that the women's game has not been given the same level of care and interest and credit as the men's game. People are willing to drop hundreds of millions of dollars out ahead of any revenue, out ahead of any income on the men's game because, we think we're going to get it. But the women's game isn't worth that investment. That's nonsense, right? Let's put that money in, because until we do, we don't know what the women's game can totally return. And we don't know what level of interest there can possibly be if we're only just taking baby steps on treating it seriously, right? This is something Major League Soccer had to learn on the men's side. The more professional you look, the more money you're spending, the signal it sends to the fans is this is important. This matters. You should care about this because look at what we're putting into it. So you have to send that message on the women's side. And I wanted to bring this in because you mentioned Chelsea having a blank check when it comes to the men's game. The Deloitte Football Money League report came out last week. Rob, I don't know if you know what this is. This is the annual report on the business, basically, of football.
The spending leaders?
Yeah, it's the revenue leaders. So Real Madrid broke a billion euros. Real Madrid broke this season. They're the first team ever to bring in €1 billion in a season. So we have the top 20. Chelsea is number 10 at 545.5 million euros of revenue. Okay, it's number 10, behind Spurs, by the way, which is fascinating. But they finished number 10 in the Deloitte Money League. And if you go down on the webpage for the Deloitte Money League, you can find their revenue, their change from last year. They're down 7%. You can see what elements make up their revenue. So, for example, commercial revenue is 262 million euros. Match day revenue is 93 million euros. Broadcasting is 190 million euros. Okay, so it tells you where this money comes from. It also has the women's team revenue. It shows you what the women's team is bringing in. And according to Deloitte, Chelsea's women's team brought in 2024, this is the report for 2024, 13.4 million euros. 13.4 million euros, which is first in the Women's Super League. That was their performance in the league. They finished first in the league, and they brought in 13 million euros. So, and their commercial revenue and broadcasting, a fraction of the men's team, like a tiny fraction. The men's team brought 190 million euros in through broadcasting revenue. Chelsea's women's team, 2 million euros. That's it. So again, this is like, okay, you have to keep it in context. Would we love it if Chelsea was forced to pay $10 million for Naomi Girma, or 20 million, or 30, or 40? Absolutely. But when the women's team, right, and I'll let you decide whether it's right for them to separate it, to treat it this way, or should they be taking revenue from one side and spending it on the other to prop up the women's team so we can get to that place of it's serious, it matters, care about it, more revenue comes in, justifies the spend. But when they have $13 million or 13 million euros of revenue and they spend $1 million on a player, it tells you like they're making a significant commitment relative to what the club brings in. So that's nice.
It's just generally an interesting moment for the women's game. Like there isn't one but the whole talent drain from NWSL to WSL. I mean, like I pointed out last week, there isn't one clear league that's just 100 years ahead of the other, like in the men's side. Like, there will be almost no chance of newer leagues like MLSs of the world really genuinely ever catching up that history. That's just impossible. Yeah. So it's interesting to see these teams or these leagues at somewhat of a more level footing, and maybe it'll go back and forth for a while to see who's the has the top magnetism, which pro league is the best professional league, and where we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think I've talked about it a little bit recently. That you're right about the league faction of a portion of this factor in this, but the history, the men's history gets attached to the women's team because they wear the same badge, right? Because because it's all wrapped up under the same umbrella. So, and there's, of course, UEFA organizing women's football in Europe, and there's a UEFA Champions League. And so even if you can say the Super League or the French League or the German League or whatever is not out ahead, the Spanish League is not out ahead of NWSL historically or in terms of quality, what you can say is playing for Chelsea or playing for Barcelona or playing for Lyon gives you access to things that are important on the men's side, and then that trickles over to the women's side, which is going to be tough for NWSL to compete with. They don't have a Champions League. What we're hoping for, and Nicholas Murray has said this in other places, so shout out to him who's in the chat today. FIFA needs to, maybe that was John Tannenwald who said it to me. Sorry, Nicholas. FIFA needs to do something about this and maybe put together the Club World Cup on the women's side that would feel more important than it does on the men's side. On the men's side, it feels like you're throwing that on top of something that's already there. Yeah. Right? It doesn't feel like something we really need. On the women's side, we probably need it.
Yeah, that would be exciting to see. If you haven't already, click subscribe to the Morning Kicker on YouTube channel. We are on the warpath towards 1,000 subscribers. Morning Kick Around, 2 words, on YouTube. And check us out. Follow along at mkickaround on social media platforms, X, Instagram, and the Blue Sky. And then check out our brand new Ko-Fi account. You can donate a coffee or even a monthly donation. Visit us, ko-fi.com/morningkicker.